Okay, so good afternoon. Let's get started. So my name is Chris McNulty. I am a senior product manager on the Microsoft 365 team. I am going to begin by apologizing for the slightly vigorous title they put in this session. Tips from the Masters, I think, is overselling me way too hard. And when we were assembling content and I put in the proposal, I actually didn't have a title, and someone put this title on, and I realized about a week ago that it had already been pre-printed. So it's Tips from the Masters, or Lacking a Master, me. Also, for those of you who are better at math than I am, you may notice there's only one person standing on stage. So my colleague Audrey, unfortunately, had to return to Seattle unexpectedly. So I will be pitching in on her side of the materials as well. So we wish her luck in her travels, and I will try to fill in as best as I can. So today, we're going to begin by taking a look overall at the Power Platform, which of all of our tools for building business apps is obviously central to our mission, central to how we're talking about creating business apps here this week at the Business Applications Summit. Then we'll go take a quick look at Flow templates and some of the core alignment that you need to be aware of, some of the best practices for how to manage Flow at a top level, in particular through the Flow portal. From there, we'll pivot and we'll take a look at how Flow interacts with M365, particularly with SharePoint lists and some of the core capabilities there. We'll wrap up by taking a look at the roadmap and reserve some time for Q&A. Audrey not being here makes it much more likely that this session will run even longer than expected, because once I get started, as those of you who know me, I probably never shut up. I'm looking for you to validate that, Scott? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. The Power Platform as a whole. So this is Microsoft's top-level vision for how we achieve digital transformation. Let me decode this a little for you. Over the last couple years, we've been much more focused on the problems of business. Microsoft has historically, we've done, I think, a reasonably good job of addressing the needs of IT. But in addition to what we've been doing with IT, we recognize it's important that we help your businesses and organizations achieve their goals. And when we think about digital transformation, we really think about these four core pillars for how do we provide tools that help a business engage its customers. How do they make sure that employees are engaged? How can they make sure that things are being optimized for your operations? How do you streamline and transform all of your business processes? And also, how can you change your products? The CEO of General Electric several years ago famously commented that in the future, everyone will be a software company. And if we think about it, the opportunity to whether you're in a traditional hardline industry or you've been dealing with soft cloud-based services for a while, there is some aspect of changing how products get built and how we define our products and how we enhance them. We think it's important that all of those things are elements of digital transformation. So Power Platform for us represents that central hub that sits amidst the rest of Microsoft's technologies to integrate them and be able to carry them forward as part of digital transformation. The three principal tools inside of the Power Platform: Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. They sit on an Azure-based backend that includes data connections to other data services, as well as its own internal database, the Common Data Service, for being able to capture data that you are going to light up with workflows and with applications built on top of Power Apps. We're going to talk about Power Apps not that much in today's session, because I did a session this morning where we focused mostly on the intersection of Power Apps with M365. Today we're going to be principally looking at Flow. So the business missions for Flow, when we get asked to describe, when people say, we just got Flow, what am I supposed to do with it? One of the things we find that's very helpful is to go back to we think most processes that people are using Flow for come down to one of four basic elements. One is notification or alerts. Something has happened, something has changed, something hasn't happened, but people need to be notified that it's time for something. The second is approval. that because of the status of something, someone needs to review it and make a decision as to whether to go forward or not. The third is data integration. I have a system over here, say arbitrarily Salesforce, and we have had a sales opportunity marked as a win. And to bring that forward, we need to transfer information about that opportunity to a different system. We may capture a file into OneDrive, or we may light up a list inside of SharePoint for an operational team to be able to go forward and know customers who need to be contacted with a setup kit. And then finally, data gathering. Through a flow, being able to capture new data that didn't already exist. We see those as the four principal missions for Flow in the enterprise. And so Flow provides a number of tools that allow me to build those business processes and engage with them through web, on the desktop, and through mobile devices. As distinct, I remember talking about this at Ignite several years ago. It was, in fact, when Ignite was here in 2016. Flow in those days was a very simple automation tool, largely aimed at personal productivity. One of the things that we're proud of the investments that we've made, and that you should be aware of going forward is the kinds of robust automations that you would expect from any process automation platform. Flow does all of those things today. We don't make a distinction that Flow is for lightweight performance and Logic Apps is for higher performance environments. There's nothing logically that you can't do in Flow that you can't also do in Logic Apps and vice versa. So that means things like state machines and branching and error handling, looping, all of those kinds of scenarios and more. Flow handles those out of the box. We're closing in on 300 pre-built connectors. You can also wire up your own connectors. And those are connectors that you can talk to the rest of Office 365 with. You can talk to other Microsoft services, but increasingly other cloud services. And we'll get just a taste of those as we're going through some of the demos today. Flow also provides governance and security. So you are able to, although Flow does not change your operational security to make it more open, it can become more restrictive. What that means is no one can automate anything in Flow that they can't already do themselves. So today, it may be perfectly possible for someone who's living in Dynamics to look at a contact record, read it there, type the information into their Dropbox account, and if you don't establish any controls around that, you could use Flow to automate that process. I don't know why you would want to, but you could. Flow also comes with DLP controls, so you can define data zones, so that if you have one place where it's okay for business data to exist, say between SQL and Common Data Service and Office 365, and then you say, and Dropbox and Instagram and Facebook are untrusted services, Flow does not allow you to move information across those zones. So if someone wants to use Flow to build automation between Instagram and Facebook, they can go to town on that. But you can't take information from a privilege zone and transfer it to a different area. And finally, you can extend this with custom connections and with Azure Functions. Azure Functions are one of the principal tools that we have to allow you to build an action that Flow doesn't already support inside of the connectors. We very much see Flow as being that connective tissue that allows us, with all the services that we have and other people have, to be able to stream the data from one place to another and to engage people in the system that they're most comfortable in. If you have users who are already living in Office 365, Flow comes very well into those environments, as we'll see, so that you can directly experience and interact and trigger and receive responses from the comfort of Inbox or inside Teams or inside of SharePoint, as we're seeing on the screen today. Lots of stories. We'll talk about some of them in the second half of the hour today. But our customers really find Flow to be a transformation of helping break the barriers of paper that have marooned many critical processes in the past. When we were getting this session ready, I took out some slides that I usually use to tell this story, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. A couple of years ago, I was delivering a keynote in New York. And My sister Liz is a STEM teacher on the Upper West Side, teaches 7th grade math and science. She asked me what I was talking about, and I said, digital transformation, full stop, because she's my sister, and I'm not going to bother explaining myself, right? Which is a really terrible older brother behavior. And she called me on it, and she said, okay, Christopher, and I know I'm in trouble when my full name is being used, could you please describe what you're talking about in terms that I could explain to a 7th grade class if they asked? Because I have no idea what half of that jargon means. And so we talked a little bit about how she gets things done in her school. And in her school, even as recently as a few years ago, there was still an awful lot of reliance on paper and pencil for gathering information if they needed it from parents or from other staff members. A little bit of use of email, and she knew that there were more things that were possible, but A, she didn't have any tools that she could use, and B, there was a project list, but the person from IT who came out from the central office once a month to address them never had time to get to all of those issues. So when she told me that, I said, okay, here's what digital transformation really means. Digital transformation means giving you the tools that you yourself can use to change some small part of your everyday. People like me love to stand on stages and tell audiences that you're part of the digital transformation revolution, which is fear-based marketing at its worst. It's already happened, you're behind, you've got to catch up. If you study hard at a conference like this one, maybe you can be within striking distance of the leaders. That's a terrible way to describe it. Digital transformation is really about giving each person and each team the tools that match the style that they need to be able to get something done. And so one of my many goals for today is to hopefully give you some of those tools that you can use or that you can bring back to your organization that they can use to help bring these things together. Now, one of the first places to start with it is with templates. Flow ships hundreds and hundreds of templates, most created by Microsoft, but increasingly community and vendor supported. And templates allow me to start at a higher order process. So if someone needs to automate something, the first thing that you should do or coach them to do is take a look at the available templates. Being able to, for example, if I'm inside of Power Apps, automatically upload a file to SharePoint, or being able to pick something about a file and being able to post messages. Inside SharePoint, as we'll see, we're increasingly taking a reliance on Flow to automate some of the most common scenarios, like sending reminders or being able to generate documents. So these templates are out there. You can get started with them in a matter of maybe 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll take a look at those when we get to demo here right now. So to do this, I know I have to change screens. Okay, so I'm going to start here in a list that I have of retail accounts. So this is a fairly standard SharePoint list without any formatting applied to it. One of the things that I can start to do with these is say, I want to be able to build a flow. Now, we already have one capability out of the box called request sign-off. I want to show you how to turn on a second one. So let's say I have this list of retail accounts. Let's add a column to it. Let's call this one due date. And it's going to be date time. Save it like that. And I'll jump into quick edit. So now that I have a new column, 7-1, 8-1, 9-1, 5-1, 6-1, etc., etc. So quick edit gives me that gridded view. I stay in a modern experience. I can still filter. I can take advantage of things like custom formatting. Let's turn this. Let me do some things here. Let's drag this over there. Let's keep dragging it just because I want to keep it on screen. Great. Save the view. Save that change. Let's just add a format here. So it's before today, yellow. If it's after today, red. Let's reverse that. If it's due after today, it's blue. Okay. So we've done a little bit of formatting. Since I've added a date, when I come to Flow right now, one of the capabilities that you'll see automatically wired up for me is set a reminder. So if I want to set a reminder on due date, we have a master flow that's going to be copied into my environment. It's going to ask me, how often do I want a reminder? Let's say I want the reminder 7 days in advance. So anytime we reach a 7-day threshold for any of the items in this database going forward, Flow is automatically going to send me a reminder overnight. And every user can set this up. It's a personal productivity tip that you can use to take advantage of these capabilities inside Flow. In case one of the things that comes out of the box isn't there for you, we can bring in flow templates. So here, if I say I want to create a flow, you will see a list of the templates which make sense in context, such as send an email when I get a new item in here, or start an approval process, or pick an item and send an approval into Teams. These templates and more are all available inside of the Flow portal. So if we click to see more after the second time, it's going to bring up the Flow portal. Here I can see the full list of templates that are out there and available for me. So if, for instance, I am working with Dynamics, we can see all of the integrations I can do among Dynamics, Office 365, and other services. For instance, this is one that came actually out of a real-world scenario. If you have an Excel file with a master list of vendors and you want to periodically use it to refresh Dynamics AX, this template is there and it's there for you. Likewise, there are templates that are out there that are available for Salesforce. And if we set this up, there's an understanding of what the connections are going to be. I actually don't have a Salesforce account, so I can't finish setting this up. But the templates, to show you how it works when you do have an account, let's look at some of the SharePoint templates that are out there. There used to be 48, now there are 53. So if we want to say, for example, request manager approval for a selected file, this will send this. The Flow templates understand in context what all of my data connections are, who I am, and where they're wired up. We see we have everything that we need. We can click Continue. And it's going to bring me into the Flow Designer. And so the Flow Designer is going to say, for a given file, it's going to ask me to pick where that file needs to be. Say inside retail. Let's pick support docs. And we prompt for what message you want to send to the manager. We have to get the properties of the file again. So let's go back and just say support docs. And it's going to look up my manager automatically. I don't have to do any more work for this. We have a flow checker, and we can see the flow checker, and this can be one of your best friends when you are dealing with more complicated flow, tells me no errors, no warnings. I've filled in all the required properties. I'm ready to save this. And as soon as I've saved it, I'm off to the races. Now, a couple of other tips and tricks about best practices, especially when it comes to Office 365 related flows. The first is who the owner are. The default behavior when I create a flow is it's going to run the flow it's going to create the flow with me as the owner. But I'm not limited to that. I can add an additional owner. So in this case, I didn't log in here. Let's set this up for Alan. There he is. So we can add an additional owner. So if anything ever happens to me without going to an administrator, people can go to Alan and get him to make additional changes to the flow. Yeah. So let me repeat the question about how the permissions are handled. Let me actually show you a related example here, running against a support docs environment. Okay. So this is a document-centric example. If I want to build this flow, let's create a flow. Send customized email when file is added. Connect, create flow. This one I actually don't think I need to set up any properties for. That's it, because it doesn't require any additional information. It's there, it's been saved. We can see who the connections are. The other thing that we want to be able to do inside of the ownership, I can change the owners, but there's also this option for SharePoint. You can always make the list or library an owner of the flow. And what that means is it will inherit the rights on the list or the library into the flows. Anyone who's got admin access on the list or library will automatically get admin access to the flow. Anyone who's a user of the list or library will be a user of the flow. And that way you don't have to go through multiple permissioning cycles to get people to work with this. So here we'll just say this is for retail, this is for support docs. That's that. So the connectors the question was about the connectors. So connectors do not preserve the gold account status that I have. I am logged in right now with a tenant admin. Let's say demigod-like powers to the information of my organization. What you want to make sure is just because an admin sets up a flow, anyone who invokes it should not inherit those rights. So each person who needs to execute the flow, they have rights to the flow, but the flow doesn't give them special power to go with that data source. They have to have rights in that data source. So if I'm doing things inside of a SharePoint environment, which are highly recommended, for example, there's an advanced setting inside of a SharePoint repository about permissions, about what the default behaviors are going to be if you have lots of people contributing. We see this come up a lot in organization-wide request scenarios where people who want a leave of absence, there's an HR list where someone can submit, these are requests for a leave of absence. HR gets to see everything. I should only see my own. And so the default behaviors, if I change these, saying, other than admins, people should only see the things that they created, that way, as a result, I can't invoke a flow against a data object that I don't have rights to in the first place. Okay. Some people taking screenshots. I'll let us get caught up. But that's the core of what we wanted to talk about with flow templates. Let me just come back. Some of the other tips that I want to show you. Let me jump to my other environment here. About managing flows at scale. So there's a distinction we make between flows. When you come into the Flow portal, you will see these three tabs. My flows are flows that belong to me personally that I've set up. One of the things that you will notice is get an email reminder 3, get an email reminder 2. In demo, we blow through these things a lot. But if you are setting up these kind of reminder flows for yourself in lots of environments, don't just accept the default name, because there is no quick way that I can figure out what get an email reminder 3 means unless I come in here, open it up, and see what the function is to go out and get these items. It's going to go out at 3 o'clock every day and go out and figure out what it needs to go scope. It's going to get the list name, and we'll see it's for the Airline Alliance list. So a better practice would be get an email reminder, Airline Alliance, so that way, if I'm ever trying to figure out what it is, I don't have to open each of them up. So naming is one of the tips. It's a good practice to avoid just taking what you've got out there and giving a name that's going to be meaningful to you. That's for personal flows. The same thing holds true for team flows. A team flow is any flow that has more than one owner. So in the scenario before where I added a secondary owner, that'll show over here inside team flows. For folks who were in my session this morning, we walked through an example where I'm using Power Apps and Flow to capture images, wash them through a custom Azure Services Cognitive Services model, say that 3 times fast, and then be able to recognize the image. One of the tips I wanted to also offer to you here is if I want to go take a look at what this flow has, I'll see the history of runs. I can see the full history of times where I've run this before. And what happens is when it runs, I can see when I hit an error. So looking at the run history will show me everything that happened and how long it took, and that everything came through with a green check. If I had hit an error, I'd get a red check, and it would show me where, and it would give me some trouble around that. I can resubmit a flow, or I can also, in edit mode, test a flow. So let's suppose let's take identifier off this. You'll see now flow checker will fail. And if I say I want to test it, it's not going to even let me test it. So I have to go in, identifier for when a file is created, scroll down to it since I took it off. Just one will do, thank you. And now we have an executable flow. Before I hand this out to users, I may want to test it. And so to test it, I can either trigger it myself, so go do whatever magic button I need, or I can also capture previous runs. And I can see that I ran this a couple hours ago, and if I say test it, it's going to run through. And here on the screen, you will see as it's going, I will get real-time updates on what happens. You'll see it's currently evaluating this thing. It took 3 seconds to make sure that we had something, and it repeated the action that we ran through 3 hours ago and were able to do it. Just a couple of tips about how flow at large should be managed in terms of ownership, naming, and troubleshooting. So let's come back to, where are we? I think we're on 6, no, 5. Okay. So there's other deep dive sessions that we want to make sure that you're taking a look at. If you can't come to them live, we will, not sure if we're recording theater sessions, but the deck should certainly be available. One around being able to use Flow as a query engine, the other around being able to use bots inside Flow. We're going to see a simple example of setting up a bot in just a couple minutes here. So this is the top-level mission statement for business apps across Microsoft 365. It's based on the Power Platform, but also includes our capabilities for SharePoint lists and tools like Microsoft Forms. And for us, one of the key delivery vehicles that we'll talk about is being able to do this through Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams gives me a common hub that I can plug all of my productivity tools into. Word, Excel, PowerPoint, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams Chat, Power Apps and Flow, Planner, and more. All of those things can come into the Teams client, and as long as I have a Teams client, I can automatically deploy it across desktop, across web, and across my mobile devices for my first-line workers, across iOS, Android, etc. SharePoint sits at the centerpiece of all of this tooling. As we've started to see, SharePoint lists are a great repository. You can put up to 30 million items inside of a SharePoint list and be able to use SharePoint lists and libraries to light up collaboration in things like Outlook, being able to drive business processes in Flow, being able to deal with some of the other core knowledge management and employee engagement experiences for portals, which aren't really germane to today's session, but it's just some of the capabilities that we have out there. We also recognize that there are a range of capabilities from the pro level all the way on through to everyday user activity. So for professional developers, we're expecting them to be able to build business apps using tools like Microsoft Graph and SharePoint Framework, being able to consume Azure services and light things up inside of Common Data Service. On the other end of the spectrum, we have casual, everyday users. Their tool set tends to be, how can I set up a list, maybe set up a couple of alerts, and be able to use Microsoft Forms to do some quick and dirty data gathering. Somewhere in the middle is the sweet spot of low-code, no-code business app development. And that's really where tools like Power Apps and Flow shine, being able to provide the automation and interfaces that you need to be able to deliver scaled and repeatable power for how you're going to change the way people are working in their organizations. So we took a quick look at lists with formatting. I want to show you a couple of things that we can do around flow and adaptive cards. Let's come over here to 7. So let's come back into this environment, and I want to go down to my support docs. And one of the things I might want to do is build a custom flow. Build a custom flow. And for a selected document, you'll see the things that are out there. Let's say I want to build a custom action for a selected file. So this is going to say, start with whatever file I've picked and evoke whatever flow that it is. And let's call this adaptive card approval. So it's going to look for whatever file I pick in this environment, and it's going to get its support docs. Now let's create a new step. Let's say that I want to do is create an approval. And you'll see I now have create an approval. And it's going to ask me, what kind of approval do I want? And so I can say everyone or first to respond. New support doc. Let's assign it to retail. I'll assign it to Lynn. And you could add additional markdown here. You could put a link to the item if we wanted. That's probably a better practice. So let's get take our small thumbnail. Okay, we created an approval, and the other thing that I want to do is I want to post an adaptive card. So I can do this inside Teams. And one of the things you'll say is post your own adaptive card as the flow bot to a channel or to the user. So let's post this into a channel. It's going to ask which team do I want it to go to. Say that this should go to the retail team. Which channel should it go to? Let's put it in the general channel. Ta-da. Save this. Okay. Meanwhile, let's start opening up Teams. Let's refresh this screen. So now I've built this flow, and you'll see one of the options I have is adaptive card approval. So I'm going to open it up. We didn't do anything fancy like ask to capture an approval message or anything like that. It's going to ask me to run the flow. It's going to go and run this process. And what I should see, don't ask me this again. I refresh. Hopefully this came up. Let's take a look at my flow. It should be saved. Oh, we had a failure. Let's see what happened. It wasn't the link. It didn't like the adaptive card. So, glitch of demoing live. So I could rework this, but this is going to kill the rest of the session. So apologies that I mistyped something there, but that's essentially how you can bring forward an adaptive card. To show you what that actually looks like, this is an adaptive card approval. So this is what the user experience typically looks like. You'll see that it's powered by Flow, who requested it, what the title is, what a link for more detail, and you can choose to approve or reject it, or refresh the screen. I'm going to say that I want to approve it. You can add comments. Actually, this one's already gone through process, so I'm not going to submit this, but that's essentially what the adaptive card cycle looks like. Let's come back here. So SharePoint lists, as we talked about, up to 30 million items can go inside of a list. We can do some fairly sophisticated formatting against the elements that live out there. You can take advantage of full text search and the filters pane to be able to drill down. So if you have millions of items in a list and you want users to be able to quickly get, without scrolling all the way through, you can use filters, and the indexing behind the scenes will make sure that you can get exactly to that set of records that you need. You can customize the user experience. You can embed it inside of list web parts. The process of creating a list, and we talked through this in my session this morning, we just last month started rolling out a capability we've been talking about for a few months, which is the ability to automatically generate new lists off of existing data in Excel, or from other lists that live in your organization. So if you have a master list of accounts or things to do, and you like the formatting and you like the column structure, you can start with that instead of having to recreate everything from scratch. And if your data already lives inside Excel, you can work with it right there. Lists can easily be extended into teams. We have a nice experience, so if you need to browse for any of the data structures that already live inside your environment, when I'm adding them to teams, you quickly are adding just a SharePoint tab into any of your channels, and it'll just ask you to browse for what the name of the list is, and it will go and render the list with full command bar and full formatting support right there. And that formatting, we've added a new formatting engine to it, so you can add real conditional formatting, set up tests, set up borders, give you much more fine-grained control over how you want to add conditional formats. We still support the JSON formatting that we introduced a year and a half ago, so if you want to do even more advanced customization of the experience, you can do that by attaching a JSON format to any column or any view. But we also want there to be a no-code solution, since we had an interesting debate a year and a half ago about, is JSON code? Because technically speaking, JSON is not code. It's an interpretive post-compiler language. So of course that means it's not code. But try explaining that to your users who run screaming from curly braces. So it's sort of code. So we wanted there to be a way that you could do that without having to resort to that. Very quickly, to show you how that comes together, list creation. So here's a fairly common way that business data may live inside your organization. This is my locations environment. If I'm here inside of SharePoint and I want to import a new list, I can do it right here. Say I want to create a new list, give it a name. Stores embaz. Take it from another list, and it'll browse across what's filtered inside of the graph. Or I can say I want to pick something from an Excel file. Here's my list of locations. It understands the table structure. We had a question at the booth yesterday. If you have multiple tables, you can pick one at a time for this import, or you can reassemble all the data into a single table inside Excel and then move it over this way. We get a preview of how this is going to import. The choice column. leave this one out, turn this one into currency, click Create, and in a couple of seconds, we will have our list. A la Julia Child, let me jump forward a little bit and show you what this looks like with a little more formatting applied. So here we have exactly the same list, but I've added some custom formats to this. I've added some conditional formatting into, for example, the state column. So if we want to look at what that format is, we've got a background color template applied to this. On the manager column, this is not code. We maintain a Git repository, again, because lots of non-coders hang out on GitHub. And, but all of we have look and feel for all these things. For power users, most of this is done through cut and paste scripts, because once you have this format in one place, you can usually apply it pretty easily to other places. But this is just done by cutting and pasting out of GitHub into this to give these action buttons over here. Head count. Again, this is something that can be done with cut and paste. You can also apply some formats. Anyway, I won't go through all the formatting that's there. But one of the nice things that we have now is if your data began in Excel and people are, have that comfort factor around being able to work with data in a grid, Quick Edit allows me to keep inside of that grid. And if, for instance, I come here and say, there's now 10 people at this mall in Florida, and the budget for this is, let's give New Jersey an extra $16,000 for their budget. And exit Quick Edit. All those changes are going to be there and saved for me in real time. So thinking about all the things that I can do on top of my libraries and lists, we talked a little bit about some of the out-of-the-box integrations that we have. Being able to set a reminder, we showed an example of that. Request sign-off is a way to get a lightweight approval. For more formalized publishing approval, we have content approvals. If you have news, if you have pages, if you have documents where you want an affirmative sign-off that makes something, the latest version of a document rendering, Flow also is supported directly inside of the box. You can set that up right inside of a document library. I'll show you that here in just a minute. Approving pages, approving hub joins, again, those are in-the-box automations. We won't have time in a 1-hour session to go over, but I will show you the content approvals. The other one that's also available to you, again, is being able to build your own flow from templates. So you're not just limited to what we make available in the suite, but some of the templates that we used at the outset. There are 53 templates currently available that tie out to SharePoint, almost as many tie out to OneDrive, dozens more available for Teams, and we're adding more every week. A couple of the latest changes that we've made. In the version 2 of approvals, we've established the start and wait cycle. So you can now take advantage of that too. You can trigger an approval, but you may want to wait a little while for the approval to start. Or if you want more people to be involved in the process, you can say that you're waiting for other people to come along. In creating an approval, we now make it possible for you to cancel an approval mid-cycle, so that if you started one and you cancel it, people don't still have sitting approvals waiting for them to respond to that they think that they're controlling but are no longer effective. And you also can create your own custom responses. So the default behavior is approve or reject, but with custom responses, if you want to change those buttons to say OK or cancel, yes, no, red, blue, whatever you want to have show on those button labels, you can change those in the second version of it. We've added some new connectors. We looked quickly at some of the support for the Teams connector, being able to post messages as the Flowbot and being able to post cards as the Flowbot. One that we didn't show, but I'll show you here in just a second, is the Word connector. It's a fairly common scenario that people want to be able to generate documents off of data that already live inside your organization. We could do this super easily 20 years ago with mail merge inside Word. Why it's taken us a while to get there is a different question, but you're now able to do the same kinds of capabilities in Office 365, which I'll show you here in just a second. Hub join approvals, this is something we've been talking to you about for the last few months. It is moving into targeted release at end of June. This allows you to set up an approval around changes to your organizational architecture. So as sites are attached to hubs, a site can contribute news and search scope to that master level hub. And a hub defines the common look, feel, navigation, and data structures of all of the associated sites. Based on your governance, you may not want someone to be able to set up whatever team site they want and attach it to your organizational news hub and start feeding news about their kid's soccer game and Girl Scout cookies into the top level news feed of your organization. This gives you some control over what happens in that environment. And we talked before about SharePoint permissions, the ability to make sure that any flow that's attached to a list or a library can be specified as the owner. You can do that through the portal, and it makes sure that you have a fail-safe way of making sure that the right permissions are attached to that flow throughout its life cycle. So let's take a look at a couple of those things. Coming over here. Not there. Here. Okay. So I have a list of research projects right here. Oh, Flow's finally fired. And so one of my research projects down here is the autonomous vehicle parking drone. This is an amazing innovation from Contoso that if I'm looking for a parking place, I can launch a drone from the back of my car that'll fly around and scan and tell me where there's an available parking space. It'll be coming on December 35th of this year, I promise you. So one of the things that we have is the ability to be able to create a checklist document. So if I say I want to create a checklist document, and I have the option of notifying the channel, let's run this. This is going to take this information about what this project is, what its review date is, what its effort date, and generate a custom document. Did I pick the right flow? I hope I did. Create checklist document. Okay. May have just created two. So I want to take a look at that flow. Let me show you that custom flow that's out there. Create checklist document. We built this flow. So you would build this yourself, but the flow is available from the building blocks here. It starts from a selected item in the list, and the key action that you would need to add to it is this new one that's moved into template, populate a Word template. So what it's saying here is inside of retail, here's a document, and I want you to take this document template, and I want you to fill out these 4 fields in the document, project name, effort, review date, and summary, with these fields that came from the list item. We create the file, say we want to put it in project checklist documents, and then if I said I wanted to alert the Teams channel, it'll post this as a card to the channel. That's the flow that's out there. Let's take a look at what it built. Here's the project checklist doc that I just made. And you can see it's picked up the details that I have inside of that list. So by being able to point to any Word template, I can now build that inside of a flow. So if I have a data set that I want to use to pre-populate into that template, whether it's a form or a newsletter or any of the common contract types or invoice types that you may have in your organization, you can now automatically generate this document, save it, and move it through further things. You may add approval cycles to it. Your actual results are going to vary based on what it is that you're looking to accomplish there. 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure I reserve a little bit of time for questions. So the one thing I wanted to make sure I covered today, for those of you who were in my session this morning, we talked about how we wire something up into an Azure Cognitive Services model. And so I want to show you how that works. Let's get to this environment. Okay. So in the interest of time, the example we walked through this morning, we use a Power App. Let me show you the Power App, at least delivered through Teams. So we have this Power App. I've used the Power App's tab control to be able to add this problem tracker where you can take a picture and send it in. I'm not grabbing a picture right now because I didn't actually have a picture inside of it. But this Power App will save a document into this library. And when it saves the document, you can see the document I captured this morning. It's a picture of a drink cart. It's able to reach out to Azure Cognitive Services and generate a message here saying we have a new issue that's reported in the cart. Inside of the mobile app, we return some information to the first-line worker about troubleshooting. We talked about that in the Flow session this morning. I really want to talk, though, at core about how I'm able to, in the Power App session this morning, how I'm able to use Flow to connect between content that lives in Office 365 and Azure. And the key flow that I use for that is here. For processing a new image. You'll see this is the one we used before. It ran this morning. We ran a test successfully. Let's look at it in detail. So this flow is built off of the trigger that says when a file is created. For those of you who are new to Flow, every flow is built out of at least two objects, a trigger and actions. The trigger is the set of conditions that fires the flow. And the set of conditions can be something that's automatic, so waiting for an event to happen, something that's periodic, that's triggered by a timer every hour, every day, every week, every month, etc. Or it can be done interactively. I've picked something and I've hit a button saying start this process. The trigger here is saying when a file gets created in this place, I want you to get the contents of this file, and I open up two variables, one called top and one called tag. And then I say, I want to process this image against a custom Azure model. And if the defect tag comes back, we're going to, this is where we come back and say, I want to predict the tags inside of this model. And so this is running against a custom Azure Cognitive Services model. Let me show you how that is built. So this is done using custom vision. You also can do the same thing inside of AI Builder. But building a custom image recognition model, again, as I talked about the flow that I built this morning, I can do it, so you can do it. This is an AI model that I myself built. You can see a number of images of typical airline equipment, of carts, of seats, of luggage carts, all the kinds of things that we might want to recognize. And I come in periodically. I also can introduce negative images. Sully Sullenberger, he's obviously a very famous pilot, as is Chuck Yeager. Neither are the kinds of things that I want my model to recognize. So if someone points this model at a pilot, we don't want to say, you're having a problem with a drink cart. Niagara Falls, again, not part of a standard airplane. Storefronts, not part of or lighthouses. So these are in as negative tags. And the process for being able to build a model is as simple as saying I want to add images, browse for them, and then tag with what they're going to be, and click the train button. Now, I haven't added any images, but what I can get inside of this is what the ID is of the project. That project ID that I build inside here is essential for the flow. Because the flow, you'll see right down here, for predict tags from image, we're going to say, go to this project, and then pass in whatever the file content we grabbed above is, and then loop through the return. And the reason why I'm using a loop is a custom image recognition model is going to return multiple tags, and then we have to loop through and see which the most prevalent tag was. As we get further on down, if we are at least 60% sure we have something, then I will update that file with the right tag. As you'll see, if I look at the image library, the drink cart this morning, you can see, let's turn the info pane off, you can see it was recognized as a tag, and we are 100% certain that it's a tag. You see the confidences vary based on the quality of the picture that I take, but the one I took this morning we're 100% certain. And flow is the key to being able to bring all those things together. So to wrap up, I want to talk about some of the resources that are available to you. One set of resources is our ecosystem. At Microsoft, we love our partner system. The partners on this screen are part of our Business Apps Partner Program. They all have been recognized for proven customer delivery, multiple customer successful deployments that the team and I review. We're currently in the process of receiving and reviewing applications for next year's crop, hopefully expanding them. But they span the gamut of large and small partner organizations, ones who focus on integration versus ones who focus on building solutions or shipping ISV solutions. Some are North American, some are global, some are large, some are small, some are red, some are blue. I do not like green eggs and ham, but many of them are here at the expo, so if you haven't had a chance to meet them, we'd encourage you. They are all recognized as preferred partners for Microsoft. Another example, I won't play the video, we used it this morning, but Marks & Spencer was able to build a Power Apps and flow-centric process to take the critical information. Their home office tracks all of their daily and weekly promotions across thousands of stores in a centralized SharePoint list that feeds their intranet. As they add new promotions, instead of sending emails and asking people to log in and read something in a web browser, they built a Power App. They built a Power App using Flow in a matter of about a week and a half to be able to say, as new data comes in, send an alert to all the store managers so they can open up the promotion directly on their mobile device in Power Apps. Why is that important? Because A, it makes sure that their managers stay on the selling floor. They know that the single best indicator and predictor of store success is that the management staff of the store needs to not stay in the back office, but be out talking to customers. And the other expectation the customers have is if you speak to anyone in a retail establishment, you expect them to have godlike knowledge of everything that's going on anywhere in the organization. And the fact is, if you work in food, you may not understand the current sales in clothing and home, but having that available and the whole history of promotions is a tremendous tool for people to be able to address customer questions on the fly without telling them to come to the register so they can look something up on the computer. Their story and more are available on our case study and customer story resource center pages available at this link, but you don't need to remember this link. All of these resources and more are available in our Business Apps Resource Center, available at the top link. Case studies, downloadable templates. For example, if you're trying to deal with travel requests or employee onboarding, we have sets of Power Apps Flow and Power BI reports that you can use and integrate to help solve these challenges in your organization. White papers, analysts, videos, and more, all available at the link here on the screen. People are taking pictures. I will count 3, 2, 1. Good. Okay. Quick notes on the roadmap in 30 seconds or less. InfoPath and SharePoint Designer roadmap. You waiting for this one? This is my friend Chox's joke. There's no roadmap. They're deprecated products. They're not coming back. End of support is 2026. You should be using Power Apps and Flow for these tools. They remain in support, so that doesn't mean that you can't use them today, but please don't start new projects with them. If there are critical gaps that you're seeing, we're not really aware of them, but we'd like to learn more. We want to help make sure that we're retiring that legacy of InfoPath technical debt that's out there. 3, 2, 1. Okay, this is the full roadmap for everything that we're doing across M365. This year is actually very much, if last year was the year of lists, this is very much the year of teams. We're spending a lot of time and work bridging the gap to make it much easier than ever for you to start inside teams to be able to create lists and forms and flows. So all this and more are available there. I will keep this up on the screen because people find it helpful to have up there to answer questions. That said, you've been a great audience. Thank you so much for coming to the BizApp Summit. Enjoy the rest of the conference.